Welcome to Headlines. The AZAL plane crash, which killed 38 people and severely injured 29, according to Anewz's sources in the Azerbaijani government, was caused by an attack by a Russian Pantsir-S air defense system. According to Russian sources, at the time of the flight over the territory of Chechnya, Russian air defense forces tried to shoot down Ukrainian UAVs. On the circumstances of the crash, we're talking to Serik Mukhtybayev, an aviation expert in Kazakhstan. Mr. Mukhtybayev, thank you for joining us. First of all, the preliminary investigation suggests that the likely cause of the tragic plane crash was a projectile from the Pantsir-S system. Do you think it would have been possible to land the plane on Russian territory and save more lives?
There is no preliminary investigation yet, none at all. Currently, an intergovernmental commission has been established, which includes representatives from 3 countries and aircraft manufacturers. It's likely that additional engine manufacturers who are now gathering information will be included. I believe this will follow 3 directions in accordance with international requirements. This is being examined in the following areas: human factors, technical aspects and external influences. Based on the collection of information, the decoding of the black box data, navigation data and data from airports and airlines, decisions will be made on which directions the investigation will follow, or whether all of them will be pursued simultaneously. That is, conclusions about the causes of the catastrophe will be drawn based on this information. As a rule, a catastrophe is not caused by a single factor, but by a combination of several factors that ultimately lead to tragic consequences.
In the footage that surfaced, it is noticeable that the plane first flies nose up, then climbs, then seems to nosedive, and then straightens out again, before ultimately making what could be called a hard landing. Could you provide your assessment of how all this unfolded? And also, the crash happened quite close to the shore. What could be said about differences when it comes to landing on land and landing on water?
As for the first part of the question regarding the videos available on social media, it is evident that the aircraft had serious technical problems, specifically issues with its controllability. The crew did everything possible to somehow manage the flight. This is also evident from flight trackers, as seen on websites showing the flight trajectory. From this, it is clear that there were serious technical problems, and the crew tried in every way to control the situation. The second point concerns whether landing on water or solid ground is safer. In this regard, in my opinion, landing on water is more dangerous. Why? Because at high speed, when the aircraft comes into contact with water, water has a very high density. It is practically an incompressible liquid. The aircraft would likely be destroyed instantly. In contrast, landing on solid ground offers a higher chance that the aircraft would remain relatively intact. In yesterday's incident, for instance, part of the aircraft remained intact, and thanks to this, some people survived.
What could you say on the pilot's actions in the situation? Is it possible to determine if there was anything else that could have been done?
I believe the pilots did everything possible under the circumstances they were in. This can be explained by the fact that the aircraft stayed in the air for more than 2 hours, and the pilots fought to keep it operational. In the end, they managed to bring it to AZAL airport. In this regard, there are no complaints about the pilots. Most likely, it is thanks to their professionalism that the majority of passengers survived.
You mentioned that based on the footage, it can be seen that the aircraft had issues with its handling. Considering these evident control problems, how challenging would you say it was to fly from Grozny to Aktau?
I think it was a very challenging mission, and the pilots managed it and were able to bring the aircraft to the airport.
One of the versions circulating in the media suggested that the plane might have been mistaken for a combat drone. At the time, there was reportedly an attack near Grozny. In your opinion, how likely is it for an airliner to be mistakenly identified as a combat drone?
You are right to assume this, but I think all conclusions and findings will be made by the Commission currently investigating it. They will have all the necessary data, reliable information from the landing airport and navigation service data, to make an informed final decision. Whether it was possible, as you say, to detect or identify a particular flying object, whether it was an aircraft or a drone, the Commission will provide all the answers, I believe.
When a civilian aircraft approaches an area where military operations are taking place, how does communication occur between civil aviation authorities and military authorities? What's the protocol? Does the military receive warning about civilian aircraft flying in the area?
Если вы в курсе, то есть если это какие-то есть.
If you are aware of this, any concerns about aviation safety, whether military actions or missile launches, even launches from a cosmodrome, the airspace is simply closed and no one is allowed to fly there. This is standard international aviation practice. If you open Flight Radar 24 now, for example, you will see that the entire territory of Ukraine is essentially not being used at the moment.
Не используется.
It seems that in such a situation that the civilian aircraft should be warned that military operations are underway and that it should avoid the area.
Дается по авиационным каналам, всем дается.
Typically, information is provided through aviation channels to everyone stating that a specific sector of airspace is closed for civil aviation. This is standard practice in any country where there is a threat, broadly speaking, to the safety of civil aviation.
Ну, грубо говоря, безопасности полетов гражданских воздушных судов.
Thank you for speaking to Anewz. That's all in this edition of Headlines. Thank you for tuning in.